Again, on behalf of the New England Antique Racers, I want to thank you for coming. I have a very distinct pleasure, the very easy job to be able to introduce as Master of Ceremonies, probably someone that does not need any introduction to any race fan in the world. But we have at our pleasure to serve as Master of Ceremony today is a man who grew up in the New England racing scene. Parents were very much involved in owning a racetrack, owning race cars, and he grew up all around these foul-smelling, fast-moving vehicles. Went on to graduate from that level to become a national broadcaster for the ABC network. And the amazing thing is he's not just an auto racing broadcaster, but you'll turn the TV on, you'll see him with on either ABC or ESPN, either doing racing events, other types of sporting events, including football games, basketball games. My pleasure to introduce as your Master of Ceremonies, Mr. Jackie Arute.
Well, that was quite an introduction, Alan. The check is in the mail. Thank you. You know, it's very, very difficult for me to come to an assemblage of people like this because you all mean so much to me. You know, I cut my teeth, as many of us did, in an era where sport did take precedent. You know, back in the days when we were hippies and we wore love beads and bell-bottoms, and everything was coming apart at the seams in the United States, the one thing that you could always go back and know was going to be the same is they were going to drop the green flag at Malta at 8 o'clock on Friday night. At Saturday, they were going to go to Stafford or Norwood. And on Sunday, we were going to go to Thompson and then go to Utica, Rome, try and make the Consi. But there's also a time, and I think what's terrific about finally bringing everybody together is we are probably one of the few sports that does not honor our heritage, and that does not protect our heritage. How can we expect the Jeff Gordons of the world, the Ted Christophers of the world, the Rene Dupuis of the world, to know what auto racing is and how important it is, unless we can somehow give them access to its heritage and its history? And what you people have done with the idea of a traveling Hall of Fame will accomplish that, at least for New England. It's been a dream of many of us for many, many years, and I applaud everybody that's a member of NEAR that has made it come true today. Now, one of the reasons why they asked me to be the MC, besides the fact that I would work for free, was the fact that, as Al said, I probably remember most of the people that are going to be presenting, and I also certainly do hold dear all of the people that are recipients. But the tough part for me is the stories that I'd want to tell you about most of these individuals. This is a G-rated show, but if you want afterwards down by the bar, no problem. I can throw the best of them under the bus. But right now I'd like to introduce, to make the first presentation, a fellow that again has been part of the sporting scene in New England for well on to 35 years. And he came over from a terrific sport that has always been part and parcel to my interest during the winter months, and that was ice hockey. But he figured that auto racing was simply ice hockey on 4 wheels. Will you welcome, please, Mr. Russ Conway.
I knew I wouldn't escape that. He's in the slammer. I echo Jackie's appraisal of what these people have done, because certainly it's the past that gets you to the present and to the future, and I know what it's like, as do many others, to organize things, and I want to tell you, all of you have done a heck of a job, and you're around the room, but they really deserve the credit here for putting this together. What about a nice hand for all of them? It is with the deepest sense of respect, honor, and appreciation that we stand before you today. Unfortunately, Ollie Silva has been hospitalized with a serious sugar diabetes ailment for the past month and is unable to be here today. However, we can assure you that he is extremely thrilled and honored to be among these very special people inducted today into the New England Auto Racing Hall of Fame. We knew back in the early 1960s and throughout the 1970s that we had a very special driver in our midst. To us, with the New England Supermodified Racing Association, Ollie was more than a champion. He was humble, quiet, unassuming off the racetrack. He let his racing do his talking for him. He was our Bobby Orr, our Ted Williams. What made many of Ollie's hundreds of victories so special is that many of them came away from his home track at Star Speedway, or prior to that to the old Pine Speedway in Groveland. Ollie never had a big sponsor. He built many of his own cars himself. He maintained them, set them up. He had good people with him. He raced them, repaired them. He won in other people's backyards, from Florida to California, Ohio to Canada, and throughout New England, against the best super-modified, modified, late model, sprint car, and old coupe drivers there were. He was a master traffic driver, arms always in motion. His rear to the front, back of the pack charges were electrifying. There are many memories of the Big O, or as Dick Berggren used to like to call him, Dynamite Ollie. Others called him Quicksilver. Others called him other names. I remember a modified special event at Star where all the heavy hitters were there. Ollie and Bugsy Stevens ran side by side for the lead, each of them briefly nudging ahead of each other, never once clanging wheels, the ultimate compliment of two drivers who trusted each other. And this went on for a good 20 laps. The crowd went absolutely crazy. And with 2 laps to go, along came Leo the Lion Cleary. And then the crash, and then the cloud of smoke, and Ollie limped back to the pits with a flat tire. He shrugged his shoulders afterwards, and he simply said there would be another race, another time. And there were many other races, and many other races that Ollie won. He smiled when we informed him of this honor here today. Long overdue is the fact that many New England races should be recognized like this, and it is finally happening. If there is a legacy left by all of them here today, including Ollie Silva, is that they never, ever let the fans down. Thank you for caring. Thank you for recognizing one of the true gentlemen and legends of this sport, a true champion who in 32 years never quit until he had to. His family and many of his friends are here today to share this honor, and I would like to ask his sisters Beatty, Annie, Jenny, and his brother Manny to come up here for this presentation. And by the way, if you really want to know why Ollie Silva was such a racer, he grew up in a family of 16. Come on.
Ladies and gentlemen, how about a nice round of applause for Ollie Silva's family? Now, what is being distributed right now are 2 plaques. One with the photo will be the plaque that will travel on the Wall of Fame. The other plaque will be presented to Ollie. And once we have a little photo here, we're going to ask for some comments from the family. And I'll tell you what, I remember Ollie Silva, and I think probably the thing that I remember the most about him is you called it a super modified, but I always thought it was a champ car, at least the back part of it. And I always wondered also just how he could hop into any type of car, go to any type of racetrack, and be not only competitive, but be considered a potential winner. And you're right, the one thing that will always stand in my mind is regardless of what the outcome was out on the racetrack, he would always come in and say, there'll be another day. Unfortunately, there'll never be another Ali Silva. Anyway, who wants to speak for the family? Draw. Feedy, you want to speak?
They're all like Ollie. They're so shy.
I know.
Thanks, Jack.
What can we say? What can we say?
Go ahead.
Thank you for,
It's fine.
I don't know, thanks. This is something new to me. I've never done nothing like this. I like it. Thank you for everybody. It's a pleasure being here, and we're really proud of our brother.
Thank you. We'll have the ceremonious hanging of the first plaque, and there's no rhyme or reason to these, ladies and gentlemen. We just kind of gather them together. It's not indicative of number of votes or popularity. All of these people are champions and deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Thank you very much. The next person to be inducted into the Hall of Fame was, well, we used to call him the Clark Gable of auto racing. That goes to show you, first of all, how old he is. In fact, as rumor has it, he was older than dirt when he was racing. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because the man that's going to make the next introduction is another fellow that one night I was arrested with him at the Waterford Speed Bowl for hanging out unsolicited brochures, but he is the voice of the Daytona 500, and he is the key guy at CBS Television Sports for motorsports. Will you welcome my very good friend and another New Englander that's made it and come home, Mike Joy.
Thanks, Jack. You and I have shared a lot of microphones over the years, but I'm probably never been prouder to share one than this afternoon. Forbes magazine and Sports Illustrated in the last 6 months have both said that auto racing is the fastest growing sport in America today. CBS's own survey 2 months ago of the ratings, in an era where the NBA and the NFL are very happy just to retain the same ratings as a year or 3 years ago, stock car racing on CBS and at the cable networks and at ABC is up 20% over the last 2 years. That means that our sport is growing by 10% a year in terms of new people coming to it. And I agree totally with Jack that we don't do a good enough job of preserving our history and letting these new fans know that, you know, Richie Evans was the intimidator long before Dale Earnhardt, you know, could make the field in a Winston Cup race. That Pete Hamilton gave hope to every young racer in New England that there was a place for them down south at the highest level of the sport. That there was a fellow named Ronnie Bouchard winning Most Popular Driver awards by the bundleful long before Bill Elliott ever got out of Dawsonville. That if there's a rubber snake in the room, Renee Charland put it there, and then Bugsy Stevens moved it. This is our sport. This is our heritage. This is why we're here. Like Jack, I've been very privileged to see most of the races that have been and will be talked about today. And that car that Ollie called a super modified and you called a champ car, darn if he didn't throw a Pinto body on it, lap the field twice at Waterford Speed Bowl with that same old bus. And it was the same car. Racing's gone through many transitions, many individual events that would be termed landmark in the growth of the sport. For stock car racing, probably the day was February 1979, when this entire part of the country was all socked in a blizzard and people had nothing to do but sit home and watch the Daytona 500 live for the first time. People tuned in a race, ended up watching a boxing match, and we grew a whole new generation of race fans at that point. When Stafford Motor Speedway was paved and when a number of the Northeast tracks made the transition from dirt to asphalt, that too was a landmark event in the development of the sport and in the drivers who transitioned with it. One of those was a young fellow who attempted to run his first race in 1947 at the tender age of 17, was thrown out of the racetrack when it was found he was underage. He later, a couple of years later, made his official racing debut and went on to collect victories in the modifieds from Maine all the way to the Carolinas, including race victories at a dozen New England tracks. He won the Riverside 500 in 1960, the 500-lap modified team race, captured championships at Riverside Park just down the street in Agawam in 1962, driving Jim Jorgensen's Zero, and won the Stafford Speedway Championship in 1967 in B.B. Zielinski's M6. You could always tell Gene Bergen from a distance from the end of that room, because he'd be the guy with the well-worn, wrinkled smile, a cigarette stuck firmly between two fingers, just kind of sitting there waiting for the feature to go out. And then he'd go out and come from the back to the front and either beat the competition or destroy the car trying. It's fair to, I mean, Gene was a take no prisoners, win at all costs kind of driver. And if he drove the car up on the truck with the trophy, that was great. And if they had to use the bucket loader to put it on the truck, well, you know he was leading or trying to get there. He was perhaps the Buddy Baker of his generation and of New England. Buddy, you'll recall, won the Daytona 450 11 times. And once had a one-lap lead with 8 laps to go in the days before radios. And they came to pit road and held out the signboard and it said easy. And Buddy was trying to read the sign, ran into a lapped car. And that was, he tells the story much better than I do. But it's fair to say that Gene Bergen would win or get all there was out of the car trying. And I talk about landmark events and landmark, just little glitches in the graph that help define this sport. And Gene Bergen and Bob Judkins did just that. In 1971, modified racing was at a crossroads. Attendance was somewhat on the decline. There were few new young names in the sport, and the makeup of the people in the grandstand was aging. Gene Bergen and Bob Judkins brought the number 2X Pinto to the Stafford 200. It was a year-long battle both to build that car that Jackie's dad waged with NASCAR for the right to put late model bodies on the cars, and it was somewhat of a gamble for Bob Judkins to be the first to try it. But when they won the pole for the Stafford 200 and led every lap, when they drove that car into victory lane, the face of modified racing changed forever. Because now you had, instead of what was once called jalopy racing and pre-war coupe-bodied cars that the younger generation couldn't relate to and now long for nostalgically, you took that sport and you put it over, and now you had Pintos and Vegas and Gremlins and cars that people off the street could relate to and recognize and wonder how you could take those little tiny compact no performance cars and put hulking tires and huge engines in them and transform them into race cars that everybody could get excited about. And from that day, modified racing gained a whole new generation of fans who, as stock car racing is built on, could come to the racetrack and see a car they related to competing hard against other cars that looked kind of like the ones in the parking lot. And the fellows we have to thank for that are Gene Bergen and Bob Judkins and the 1971 Stafford 200. So for all those reasons, and because today, like Gene Bergen, there are Teddy Christophers, and there are other drivers who will win at all cost, or wreck or blow up trying, and do everything they can to get that car for victory lane. That spirit of competition is still alive, but it's embodied in the fellow who's going to come up and accept this plaque, Gene Bergen.
God, this is really something. I hope you all can hear me out there. You know, I guess this is one time I wish I wasn't starting on the outside pole. Honestly, I wish I was about 6th or 7th. But, you know, I'm glad you all came here today, because this is going to be a day that all of us are going to remember. We're never going to forget this, because I'm so excited for next year, in 1999, to see who the new inductees are going to be. I just can't wait. It's a great and wonderful thing that NEAR has done. I would also, if I take a few minutes, just to thank NEAR and its members, and its president, Al Feeney, the board of directors and the advisors, Pete Zanardi, and the selection committee, Kathy and Don Cody, for making this day possible for us, for all of us. Thank you. I also would like to thank some of my car owners. Man, there were many of those. Some might lasted a heat race. But I want to thank, you know, my car owners, the crew members, for making this day possible for me. And earlier, as I was walking around, you know, there were some here, Dexter Burnham and Jimmy Jorgensen, who owned the Zero that I drove for, and Neil and Snyder, Chuck over there. And these guys worked so hard to keep that car going week after week. And there wasn't much money in it for them either, but they did it. I'm so grateful for them, because they're responsible for me being here. And of course, one other person, my wife. I want to thank her too, because she's kind of put up with a lot of things, you know. And, you know, am I taking too long? You know, I don't think none of you are going to believe this, any of you. I'm having a hard time believing this, and so is my wife. I mean, she's not pregnant or nothing like that. Don't. Because if she is, we're going to have a heart-to-heart talk. But in a couple of days, to be exact, February 3rd, Lucy and I are going to be celebrating our 47th wedding anniversary. Last but not least, I'd like to thank God for giving me this ability to drive a race car. Thank you very much, and God bless. Where do I do this one now?
Put that one on the wall. Mike, you want to go help him?
Yep.
You better.
All right, Bergie, you're on the outside pole. Ladies and gentlemen, a true champion, Gene Bergen.
Thank you. I got a quick story. This is a real quick one. Since I won't be standing up here when we honor Harvey Tattersall, he was the first promoter I worked with. This guy was the second, and I'm still here. That's pretty good. Harvey was one of the first guys to recognize, first promoters to recognize that auto racing had to first and foremost be entertainment and get people in the seats. And I'll give you just a little Harveyism. Harvey ran the race from the infield at Riverside Park, not from up in the tower. One night, Tony Mordino was driving Richie Bedoin's coupe, Jarb's coupe, the 500. He got in an argument with Harvey down on the start-finish line, which was a dangerous thing to do. Harvey motioned him to the back of the field. Tony wasn't going to go. Harvey said the back of the field, and he did it, of course, very dramatically for everybody in the fan, back of the field. He's not going. The fans are in an uproar. Harvey makes a little move over his shoulder like this, and while he is arguing with Tony Mordino, who could argue and throw a mean punch, the bucket loader is coming to pick up the back bumper of Jarv's coupe. Toes Mordino into the infield. He says, okay, they're going to put me down. I'm going back out and get in line. They left him there. For the next 10 minutes, Tony Mordino is backing the car, jamming it in gear, backing it into the bucket loader. He never got back in the race. Harvey stood there in the infield and smiled. The fans loved it, and Ed Carroll sent Tony Mordino a bill for $500 to fix the bucket loader. Now that's entertainment.
You know, it's really scary when you can listen to Mike or bring it back in your own mind. But for those of you that aren't very happy now and again, in fact, A.J. Foyt, after last week when I asked him if his driver suffered from terminal dumbness, one of the people that you can blame is sitting at the head table here, because when I was in my younger bent and I was what would you call, the figurehead promoter at the Stafford Motor Speedway, this group, Inc. Incorporated, formed the greatest race in the history of spring, the Spring Sizzler. And, you know, being new to the promotions business, they had it all figured out. They were going to give a poll to the poll winner, I mean a telephone poll, and they were going to take care of the cash. And, well, Brucey Cohen was in charge of the cash, so he was going to spend the night in the office. Well, Bruce never really put two and two together that maybe part of the deal over there was that you had to come in fairly early to get things going. I walk in the door, and as I flip on a light, he's got a gun pointed right at me. And you don't know how close he came to shooting me. There are 2 ex-wives, numerous members of my family, numerous people that watch me on TV that wish he had pulled the trigger. Another member of Inc., and probably the silent member, you never hear a lot from him. You hear from Dr. Dick Bergeron, as he does a great job on his now television gig and also with Stock Car Magazine. Bruce, you just walk in the door and you know Brucey's been there, but there's a fellow that probably, I think, is probably the glue to the trio. And when I think about being a real racer, if I could ever be given that title, I think it would mean a lot to me. But I think it would mean more to me if it was given to me because I was a lot like this next man who's going to make the next presentation. Because he is, in my mind, the embodiment of a true racer. Will you please welcome Mr. Lou Boyd?
Well, thank you, Jackie. This is a little tough. Like Gene, I really don't like starting up front. And I must say that with these announcers here, I feel a little bit like coming on after the stripper. So let me just start by reading you something. 13 years ago, Bones Boursier wrote in Speedway Scene the following: "If New England racing was personified by any one individual, that man had to have been Bill Welch. Welchie's passing on Tuesday, February 5th, 1985, at the age of 73, ended a racing life as active as anybody in these parts has ever lived. Bill Welch not only managed to divide his over 50 years in the sport between being a mechanic, an engine builder, a car owner, an official, a promoter, and a popular announcer, but he did them all with an incredible amount of poise, dignity, and foresight." As usual, Bones had it right. Here was an incredible man who could diffuse anything that racing could offer up with his sweet reasonableness. A racing father figure, he gave our sport far more than he took. Pete Zanardi once said, "Welchie's gentleness single-handedly centered racing as it tried to free float in the 1970s. But there was another side to Bill Welch. No pushover, this guy. On the gas, always young. Few knew he almost died at Hudson, going off the backstretch without lifting in his Offie-powered midget. He liked guys who pushed the button. He spoke of Ron Bouchard, Dick Hansen, Bug Stevens, all of whom are here to honor him today. He liked, with Dave Morton, who's also here today, to build motors and carburetors that really stretched the rules. He liked outrageous open competition promotions such as the World Series at Thompson and the Sizzler, both of which he essentially started. Frankly, it's the biggest personal honor of my life to be part of Bill Welch's induction to this Hall of Fame. And I'm really pleased to be presenting to Jackie Rutt, because I know that it was Welchie who taught Jackie and Mike Joy and Dick Berggren the ropes of announcing back when those guys were knee-high to a Nerf bar. So remember with me, Jackie and Mike and Bergie and all of you whom Welchie touched, what he used to say when he'd sort of nudge up to the beer stand after the beef feature every night. He said, "You know, ordinarily, I never have more than one." Well, a time or two independent counsel might have had something else to say about that, but we do know this for sure. We'll never have more than one Bill Welch.
Lou, don't go away, because I've thought a lot about it when they asked me to accept this award, and one of the things that through my career has I've never forgotten is where I came from. And one of the things that I never forgot was Bill Welch. Now why? Because when I was young, dumb, and didn't know any better, I decided I was going to be an announcer. And the man that molded me and made me what I think is a fairly decent journalist was Bill Welch. And how did he do that? He did that talking to me like a father, tutoring me like a teacher, and being my friend. And he not only did it for me, once he finished creating me, he decided he would create Michael Joy as well. And Michael, I'd like to ask you to come up at this time, because I think it's just as important that you accept this as I do. Because there have been many, many times, whether it's in the victory lane of the Daytona 500, victory lane at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, or even just back at Stafford on a Friday night, that I don't think of Bill Welch and think, how am I doing, boss? It means a lot to me that you guys have decided to induct Bill into the Hall of Fame, and on behalf of Shirley Jackman, who was so close to Bill and wanted to be here to present this, I accept it, and now I'm going to hand it off to Mike for his thoughts.
We had a door on the announcer's booth at Stafford, and it said "Stars at Work," and Welchie's name was at the top of the list. And I have that door. Kind of proud of that. This is very difficult for me because, and I'm glad Jack mentioned this, because when I came to Stafford, I was one of those hotshot young kids, and I knew all the answers. I didn't appreciate Bill then. It wasn't until I realized through his teaching, and I didn't even realize I was being taught, that I may have known all the answers, but I didn't know any of the damn questions. And I have Bill to thank for that, just as Jackie does. And another fellow who I work with, who also needs to be up here for all the same reasons, and that's Dick Berggren.
Come on, Dick.
When I met Bergie, he was a good PA announcer. At Thompson Speedway, we worked together, and the three of us from Welchie learned that this sport is not just about the excitement of cars going around and the men who drive them, but it's the men who build them, who work on them every week, how they do that, how they come by their skills and by their innovations that makes this the most exciting sport on earth. And it really wasn't until he was gone that I realized where I'd gotten so smart. And it was Bill. And it was all of those years of knowledge and first-hand experience that he brought to all of us and to the people who listened to him. And for all that, I'm proud to be up here with you and with Dr. Berggren.
I'll just say if Welchie were here today, he would be enormously proud not just to receive this award, but to see this huge turnout of people and the reasons that have brought you all here. He was, in fact, the Dean of New England Auto Racing. It always put a smile on his face when someone would call him that. He said, oh, I don't know about that, but he did. He was, in fact, the Dean of Auto Racing in this part of the world. And it's a pretty special thing that he's among the very first inductees. Thank you all.
Dick. While Dick's doing the honors, I want to tell a quick Welchie story. One of the great things that we wanted to do at Stafford was, and it was Bill that came up with the idea, said, you know, we ought to have announcing from the scene of the accident. So we got together and we worked out, back then they didn't have anything called wireless microphones. So Bill got a little motorcycle and he got a little plug-in microphone, and we touted it as we're going to have, you know, on the scene accident announcing, and Bill Welch, the Dean of New England announcers, will be there. The entire night, from warm-ups, qualifying heats, support features, go green to checkered. Finally, there's an accident. Bill gets on his motorcycle, runs over there, and we're throwing down to him. And as we throw down and Bill turns on the microphone, the driver, who shall remain nameless, I believe is maybe in this room, said, he ran into the side of my goddamn car. Bill, and you got to know what a great guy he was. I mean, he had class. He couldn't get it shut off soon enough. So as we bellied up to the bar that night, Bill, in his inimitable way, said, I think we've got to work on this on the scene announcing. This is kind of tough for me because it's like I have a story about each person, including the bus home. Will you please welcome for the next induction Mr. Pete Zanardi.
Well, let me tell you, Ernie, it's time we're going to get down in the dirt, Ernie. Ernie Gahan is a winner. He was a winner in the mid-1950s on the tough dirt tracks in New Hampshire. Came to Stafford and Fonda to run NASCAR, and he was a winner some more, and he kept right on winning right through the modified racing's golden days. And Ernie Gahan is a champion. He was the first New Englander to win the National Modified Championship. And it was a great battle. If some of you may remember, went right to the final race with Ray Hendrick. And in every sense of the word, Ernie Gahan is a hero. In 1963, some of you remember, he pulled Marvin Panch, or helped to pull Marvin Panch from a burning race car at Daytona. Then Ernie, with badly burned hands, went out and did all right in the 500. But I guess it's the writer in me, because I think what's really special is listening to Ernie Gahan tell a story. Anytime Ernie wants to do that, guys and ladies, belly up, because this guy's going to be much better for listening to Ernie Gahan. Maybe he can tell you about running on the Beach Road course at Daytona. Maybe he can tell you what happens when you try to get under Frankie Schneider in the first turn at Middletown. Then there's that day at Stafford when he reached into a car and tried to get a piece of Renee Charland, wound up with Renee Charland's shirt. And that time at Fonda when he and Bill Wimble went up to the cow barn to try to settle things. A strange result. Ernie's got a ton of stories. You know, the great sports writer Grantland Rice, when you're a sports writer, this is the guy you're supposed to take after. Grantland Rice said, "Take my lad what the great game gives, for all men die, but the record lives." And without question, Ernie Gahan's record justifies the accolades we're giving him here today, just like it justifies the accolades he's got many times previous to this. But it seems to me, Ernie Gahan stories reflect the humanness of our sport, and that is, after all, why we're here. And only a man who truly loved what he was doing, only an individual who gave so much and continues to give so much, can tell a story like Ernie Gahan. It is my high honor to present to all of you Ernest Gahan.
Bergie's supposed to speak for me.
Oh, Bergie.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody that put this thing on, and Pete probably doped me up a little bit, but whatever. I was a good storyteller at times, you know, and stuff, and I appreciate the award, and I appreciate everybody that was here, and I appreciate my fans throughout the years and stuff. I'm sure there was a lot more important people than I was, but all these fans always stood by me for years and years and years, so, hey, I'm still here, so I did something right. Okay? Thank you all very much.
Great thing about Ernie Gahan, he's always a man of few words until the microphones are put away, and then you can't stop him. You got to put it on the wall, Gahan. You get the one with the picture, Pete. I know you're, you know. Yeah, okay. Who's on first? What's on second? Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Alphonse and Gaston. There we go. A nice round of applause. Ernie Gahan. One of the things that Pete probably forgot was when he pulled Marvin Panch out of that burning race car, he was awarded what is considered by most in NASCAR the most prestigious award that can be given out. It's called the Buddy Schumann Award. And the names of people that are on that award reads like who's who in the world of motorsports. And one name that remains with that award is our own Ernie Gahan, and I think you should be congratulated for that. Now, our next inductee really should not be inducted. He should be the Hall of Fame, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Will you please welcome from CBS Sports and also from Stock Car Racing Magazine, Dr. Dick Berggren.
It's a pretty special day, isn't it, to honor all of these people that we have watched race for so long, or those of you who have been fortunate enough to race with them. I am especially honored to be able to announce the induction of Wild Bill Slater. Wasn't it fun to watch him race? I mean, he was something really special. I remember sitting in a grandstand at the London Waterford Speed Bowl. They announced the name Wild Bill Slater, and at least 80% of the people booed, and I couldn't figure out why. I'd read in the newspaper this guy was a big winner, and then I watched him race, and I understood almost immediately. He was just better than the rest of them. You'd watch Bill come off the corner, and everybody else, their car is all out of shape, and the back end's bouncing off the wall, and Bill would just wait for the right opportunity and just gently and carefully slide by, never touch anybody else, take the trophy down there at Victory Lane, and go off and beat him again the next night some other place. He was one hell of a race driver, a natural talent, a thinking race driver, a very special guy behind the wheel for sure. But I think Bill's greatest contributions didn't necessarily come from driving all those race cars. They came from being one of the great ambassadors of this sport. And when you think of what Bill Slater has given to automobile racing, particularly in this part of the country, he has given it all but his very life. And did he not come very close to giving it, that too, that awful night at Thompson Speedway when he was hit by Fats Caruso? Stafford Speedway right now would probably be a parking lot or a shopping mall. It surely wouldn't be what it is now if Bill Slater didn't take it upon himself to persuade Jack Arute that the smartest thing he could possibly do in his life was buy that racetrack and run it for the next, 30 years and then some, and still going? And all those trade shows where racetracks didn't go to trade shows and Bill Slater did, and he parked that pace car right out in front so that everybody who went in, the first thing they saw was that pace car. And all the drivers, Bill Slater has quietly put a hand on the shoulder and given a little bit of advice. And all the people who might not have been such good fans, had Bill Slater not been there to turn the show around, to make things happen, and to push the message of automobile racing. Great driver? Absolutely. Great ambassador? Absolutely. One of the most special people to ever strap on a helmet or to ever operate a racetrack. And doesn't Thompson Speedway look pretty damn smart right about now, hiring him to be their race director for 1998? Very special guy. The Connecticut Valley Rocket, Wild Bill Slater.
Wait a minute, wait a minute. He says, I don't like to talk. You guys don't realize, but one night he announced at the Stafford Motor Speedway.
Anybody understand it?
And no, this is the way it happened. They said, Bill, we don't have an announcer. He said, no problem, I'll do it. He got on, he says, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Stafford Motor Speedway. My name is Bill Slater, and I'll be your announcer this evening. There's the green flag. Look at them, sons of bitches go.
They're excited. I got some notes here, but I ain't my glasses to read them, so I'm in trouble. The first people I want to introduce, okay, that's my help. I want to introduce to the guys who helped me put me here. There's Bob Victari, Vic Bombassi, the owner of the V8s, which if I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them. And my pit crew, John Bain, Pete Zanotti, that's a hell of a crew, Dennis McLaughlin, and all the guys that helped put me here. So if it wasn't for Bob and Vic Bombassi, there would be no V8. So I want to thank them. And I want to thank Nira. I want to thank NERA, which I've been a member of since it first started. I thought it was a good idea at the time. I still think it's a good idea. It brought out a lot of people, and the NERA deserves a lot of credit, and I wish you'd give them a clap to all the committee and everybody else for going to NERA. I drove race cars for a number of years, too many years maybe, and after I quit driving race cars, Jack DeRoot talked me into running Stafford Speedway, which I did, and that was a history in itself. And then I've been involved in that part of the business, and oh, I can see. And I want to thank right now. I'm involved in Stafford Speedway with Maka Root. And I want to thank the Root Brothers for making it a family track, and I consider myself part of the Root Brothers Stafford Speedway racetrack. And why don't you ask Dick Berger and Bruce Cole and the rest of them, when they started the Sizzler, they conned me into taking a Stafford pace car and put up posters. You wouldn't believe where we put up the posters. They had a massage parlor in Rockville, they went in and put up posters in the massage parlor. Right. So what made credit go right now is the Bob Victari, Vic Bombassi, and Marvin Rifkin of M&H Tire, who supplied the tires for the V8 since day one. So give Marvin a hand right there. Can I quit?
It's your podium. How long you want to go?
Not very long. And I want to thank my son, my daughter-in-law, my granddaughter for being here, and my cousins and everything else for being here, and I thank them all for being here. Right? Here's the glass.
Dick, you gotta come back up, and first we want Bill to hang this on the wall, and then we're going to ask you to move to the center here for a photo for the photographers. But while you're hanging that on the wall, Bill, I'm going to tell another story on you. Back when Stafford was too cheap to have two ambulances, and Bill was there, a lady passed out on the midway, and there was a race going on at the time. So Bill, being the guy that can always figure it out, gets a beer cart at the top of the hill and loads this lady who was of ample girth. For those of you who don't know what that means, she was fat. Loads her on the beer cart and radios into the infield as soon as the race is over, have the ambulance, oh my God, meet me at the pit gate. So he's pushing this lady down and he keeps going to her, don't die on me now, lady, there's only 3 laps to go.
Thank you. Bill Slater, one more thing before you get too settled in. There's a phone call for you in the lobby, a congratulatory phone call. It's a Miss Monica Lewinsky.
Oh my God!
Oh my God. This wonderful dinner today adds to the list of ways in which auto racing continues to recognize Richie Evans. He is already enshrined in the National Motorsports Press Association Hall of Fame in Darlington, South Carolina, and in the International Motorsports Hall of Fame in Talladega, Alabama. Next month at Daytona, as part of a ceremony marking the 50th anniversary of NASCAR, Evans will be honored as one of the 50 greatest drivers in the history of that sanctioning body. And yet I believe that because so many of his friends are in this room today, this induction would have meant as much to Richie as any of the other honors which have come his way. It is awfully easy to say after a person has passed on that he or she was larger than life. Well, Richie Evans managed to become larger than life even as he walked among us. Everybody knows about the races he won, and he won with astonishing regularity from New England to Florida. Everybody knows about the special events he conquered, most of them more than once. The Spring Sizzler at Stafford, the Thompson 300, Trenton, Pocono, Martinsville, Daytona. The list goes on and on. Everybody knows about the 9 NASCAR National Modified Championships. But in my mind, Richie's most notable accomplishment was the fact that along with those 9 titles came 9 selections as NASCAR's most popular modified driver, as voted by the national membership. Seldom in the history of automobile racing, and literally never in the history of NASCAR, has one driver managed to remain so dominant on the racetrack and so popular off it. Richie had an uncanny way of making even casual acquaintances seem like good friends. Because of that, everybody who knew him ended up with a collection of Richie Evans stories. It is a testimony to his stature within this sport that more than a dozen years after his death, we continue to share those stories. We pass them on to young racers and young fans as if they were part of American racing folklore, which in a very real sense they are. It's a pretty good bet that right now in a backyard garage or a corner gas station here in the Northeast, somebody is telling an Evans story. In a couple of months, on opening night at the local short track, that story will be passed around again in the grandstands and the pit bleachers. And the long shadow of Richie Evans will lengthen just a little bit. I happen to believe that the best place to hear an Evans story, or to tell one, is in a roadside tavern down the street from your local bull ring. The place ought to be good and loud. Loud with the blaring of music and loud with the sound of racing people unwinding with a beer after a summertime Saturday night. Richie was born for such places. He was, above all else, a man who liked to have a good time with his friends. Today, you can have a good time just remembering his good times. Way back in 1973, before he had ever clinched his first national championship, Evans told the writer Pete Zanardi, quote, "Some of the Richie Evans stories get magnified. The way some people talk, I wouldn't have time to race," unquote. What Richie did not say, what he did not need to say, was that most of those stories were not magnified. They were accurate and they were colorful, and now they are pieces of his legend and his legacy. It is one of the great joys of my life that I was able to be around while some of those stories unfolded. Had to run to the airport last night to pick up Richie's daughter, Tara, and hadn't seen her in quite a while, and was kind of worried that I might not recognize her. Well, anybody who knew Richie Evans will have no doubt that this is definitely Daddy's little girl. Please join me in welcoming all the way from Charlotte, North Carolina, where she currently attends Appalachian State College, Miss Tara Evans, to accept this honor on behalf of her father, Richie Evans.
I want to just say thank you, and that I also have an Evans story to share with you. When I was about, Bonesy told me, before you come up there, I'll put it down for you. But when I was just 5 years old, I played soccer, and I remember a story my father said. He said, "Tara, don't let those boys push you around." He said, "When the refs aren't looking, go ahead and stick your foot out and trip them." So, I've taken that story to heart, and it's just one I like to share. And I just want to say thanks again.
I'll hold on to that one until you're done. Okay. Tara, one more time. Stick your foot out and kick them. Richie Evans, ladies and gentlemen. When I finally got old enough to con my dad out of a few bucks so that I could go to Riverside Park to watch the Riverside 500 and the Garudis and Jocko Majak.
Mr. Harvey Tattersall, and dedicated to his profession. A man's man, a worker of people, a family man. A father of 2 children, Harvey Jr. and Florence. I came into Harvey's knowing in 1950 when he was a handicapper at the midget races at Century Stadium. If anybody remembers the Century Stadium on Memorial Avenue, which was an old dump. First it was a dog track, and then it was a racetrack, and finally a shopping center. Harvey took to me, or I took to Harvey, in 1950 at Century, and I ran for him. And then he gave me a job at Riverside. He gave me a job at Riverside, hauling cars. And from that, he made me a assistant starter, and then a starter. And he's the greatest fellow. He took more from all these drivers. He gave more to the eastern part of this country, in the eastern states, to stock car racing. If everybody remembers, he had one carburetor, locked up the rear end, and you were gone. You were a stock car driver. Well, that went on and on. Now, Harvey was also in midget racing himself. He was a stock car race driver. He ran a school in Long Island teaching drivers. He ran a school for stock car drivers teaching the safety of the stock car field. He had a hard time working with all the promoters. Now, just to give you an idea, I worked with Harvey, we worked together. I started Riverside on a Saturday. Sunday, I would do Stafford Springs with Harvey on my back and get the feature going and leave and go to Tinty's place. I forget the name of it. In what? Plainville. And I'd come back Monday and I'd go to Manance up in Troy, do that show. And then Tuesday I'd be back doing jalopies and Harvey pushing on me. And Wednesday I'd go somewhere in Connecticut, Savin Rock, Bridgeport, and Friday, Bridgeport, and then back to Riverside. I did this for 22 weeks for 10 years. And I've met a lot of nice people through Harvey, and I've been proud to meet all you people. A lot of the people are strange faces to me. I'm getting a little older. I just passed my 75th birthday. And it's been 48 years that this goes back to. Harvey has been a great friend of everybody that I know. If he didn't like you the first day, he likes you the second. He's been a great man, and his family's been good to me, and all racing has been good to me. Thank you very much.
Hey,
That's
the one you take back, too.
I used to bounce these 2 children on my knees. Believe it? Here, hold it up like this.
There we go. Try it again. Well, I've known Paul since... I've known Paul for an awfully long time. I can't remember a time I didn't know Paul. You know, I was sort of a racetrack brat, grew up around the racetracks back in the midget tracks in the, after the Second World War in the late 40s, and then around the stock car tracks later on, and it seems to me that Paul has always been a fixture. He's always been a person that we looked up to. He was a very successful man in his own right, and I know he ran one hell of a race as a starter. I'd like to thank the New Year organization, its members and its directors, Al Feeney and Kathy and Don Cody in particular for pulling this event together. I worked in the automobile racing business for over 20 years myself and put on a lot of banquets such as this. And I know the anxiety that goes into organizing it and staging it. I know the anxiety that goes on about a week before the event, and you've only got about 25% of the tickets sold. They did a tremendous job they've packed the place. They went around the country to get people from far and wide to attend, including myself. So I think they need a real round of applause once again. I want you to know that I did not bring this up, but I happened to be at Westboro Speedway on that fateful night when our MCs decided to come and pay for my parking lot. The automobile racing business is known as a fraternity, and that's because we all sort of exist in the same environment. And just as there are rivalries between car owners and drivers on the track, there are rivalries among neighboring racetracks. Well, my dad was running Riverside Speedway that season, and I was running the Waterford Speed Bowl. And my grandmother, who had been in automobile racing for years and years, came up to me and said, "Oh, the cops just got some kid papering the parking lot with flyers for Stafford Speedway." Now, I'm in the meeting, being the racing director in the middle of all this. I said, "Well, just take care of it." He said, "No, you better come out." So I went out there, and who do the cops have? Mike Joy and this guy. Well, justice is swift. The cops asked me, "Well, what are you going to do about the situation?" I said, "Well, they didn't ask for permission to paper the parking lot. I'll tell you what, why don't you just have them take the paper off and let it go." So they may have been arrested, but they still have a clean criminal record because we didn't press charges that night. But we're very honored to have our father honored by this organization and to be remembered by the auto racing fraternity. I think the New Year organization has done a very important thing in not only informing itself and running itself successfully for 15 years, but also to have this inaugural Hall of Fame event and to honor the people that basically brought us to this point in time. My dad was not the first person in automobile racing. His father was. My dad started off in the 30s as a race fan. My grandfather and grandmother dragged him around to the old dirt tracks and the old wooden board tracks in Long Island and in New Jersey. They got active in open cockpit racing. They were members of the officials, I suppose, of the Old American Racing Drivers Association, were handicappers. My grandfather was secretary of the organization, and they ran, their business, their end of the business from the bottom up, learning it the hard way. They came in from the bottom and they worked their way up. My dad dropped out of college to go racing with his father. He built and owned open cockpit race cars. In the early days, he did some racing as well. He used to say that this was back in the days of the two-man race cars, so you can imagine how far back it goes. But, with the advent of the Second World War, automobile racing came to a stop. We needed the manpower, the materials to go to war. But after the Second World War was over, racing came back with a slam. At that time, he was with the American Racing Drivers Association. He had 3 divisions, and they were racing 8 days a week in all 3 divisions, different racetracks. 8 days a week, how could that be? Well, they raced Monday through Sunday, and on Sunday they had a matinee and they had an evening show. There's a lot of stories about auto racing, and I've heard a lot of them over the years, but one of the things that my family brought forward, and in particular my father, was a lot of the stories about the promoters in the old days when things weren't right. You know, they grab the purse and they take off during the main event. And the race drivers and the car owners would, at the end of the event, you know, look for some money and they'd be gone. Back in the bad old days, before we had racing insurance to cover the drivers and the car owners, they began a hospital fund where they would take up collections at every race. Part of the back gate fees would go to a fund that would help out injured drivers and their families. A lot of the things he learned back in those days, he brought forward in the latter part of the 40s when midget races started to die out and stock car racing came in. He was one heck of a role model for my sister and myself. He brought certain principles into the business, you know, giving the guys a fair shake. He understood from his prior experiences that it was important that everybody share in the financial benefits as well as the burdens that automobile racing had to offer. He knew that the guys would race for almost nothing if there was almost nothing in the grandstand. He also knew that if it was a payday in the grandstand, everybody should share. So one of his principles was that the car owners and drivers should get a fair percentage of the attendance, and his figure was 40%. And from my growing up in the business and knowing a lot of the people in this room and people that aren't here, I know that was true. There was sort of a partnership that took place between my father and the car owners and drivers that raced with him. Those principles, I think, has made automobile racing in New England and throughout the country what it is today. My father wasn't a Lone Ranger. He happened to be in New England. We like to think of him as being the person who brought stock car racing into New England. I know he was instrumental in doing that. One thing that he was involved with that many of you may not know, he had what we believe to be the first live televised racing program out of New Jersey and out of some of the indoor coliseums in New York City on Channel 13 in New York back in 1949, 1950. My father was only one of a whole raft of people. They're drivers, they're car owners, they're mechanics, they're spectators, they're promoters that have brought automobile racing back from the old days with two Martin race cars on dirt tracks and high bank board tracks, no seat belts, maybe a linen helmet, to what it is today, which is one of the most exciting and really one of the safest sports in the world. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm very proud to accept this award on his behalf. Thank you.
We'll ask you now to post it on the Hall of Fame. You know, I think it's a fitting tribute. Ask anybody in life. There are very few people in life that are remembered solely by their first name. And in the world of motorsports, when you mention the word Harvey, it was never necessary to say Tattersall. Anybody that was around racing and anybody that respected racing knew that Harvey was Tattersall. Back up one more time to reprise his presentation to another one of our Hall of Famers. Will you please welcome Dr. Dick Bergeron.
Pete Hamilton was probably the first guy that gave inspiration to people in these parts, inspiration that they could make it big in the big time. The second guy to do it did it with such style, such character, and such pizzazz that they're still forming a line on the way south to join up with the great dream of making it to the big time. And didn't Ronnie Bouchard do it with a tremendous amount of class? From those early days in the red and white mover special at Seekonk Speedway, there was one guy who stood out among all the rest of them as the guy that everybody wanted to be like, the guy everybody wanted to be near. Probably, if you were to read the record book, it would suggest that the biggest day in his life would have been that day at Talladega, that incredible finish when Ronnie Bouchard snuck underneath and managed to grab the win away from those who thought it should have been theirs. But I'd be willing to bet that if you asked Ronnie Bouchard to name his biggest day in all of this, He'd probably tell you about a race at Stafford somewhere, or a race at Seekonk, or a race someplace else in some little short track that had somebody like Gene Bergen in it, and maybe Bill Slater was part of the thing somehow or another, or Ernie Gahan was a part of it as well, because that is his heritage. He is indeed one of us. The only shame of Ronnie Bouchard is we don't get to see him too much anymore. He's so busy making bundles and bundles of money and then carting it off to the banks with all of his car dealerships that we really don't see him. But for those of us who did get a chance to see him race and watched his act, there is sure no surprise that he is among the very first inductees to the Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, Ronnie Bouchard. And wouldn't Bob Johnson be proud of that picture?
Thank you, Dick.
Congratulations.
Well, I'm not sure, Dick. That race at Talladega was pretty exciting. It had me on the edge of my seat, I know that. But you're right. There was many, many nights that I raced at, all the local tracks with people like Bugsy Stevens. Unfortunately, not too much with Pete Hamilton. He got away on me a little bit before I got going. And Gene Bergen, Bill Slater, Ernie Gahan, some of the best people in racing. There was many, many nights. Richie Evans, super guys. I commented when I come in, the first guy I see is Bugsy. And no jokes tonight, I was surprised. There's a guy there, you could run aside of him for 200 laps, and he would never, ever rub you. And we all know there was many race drivers that didn't have that talent. But Bugsy was truly a champion, a great guy to race with. Richie Evans was another one. You could leave him down there all night, and that's where he stayed, not into you, on top of you. And just some great people that have been involved in this sport. And tonight is really a pleasure for me to be one of the first inductees. I'd like to thank Near, all the people on the board, everybody that put us up here. It really means a lot that people in New England understand, realize how big racing is, because it's a very big sport. I enjoy it. The reason you don't get to see me too much is I don't make that many trips to the bank. I wish I did. Since I got out of racing, I think a lot of people, Pete Hamilton, the people that are sitting in here can tell you, it's very, very difficult to go back to a racetrack. I never said I retired. I haven't sat behind the wheel of a race car in 10 years. And I know what would happen to me if I did. I'd be doing it again. And I think I made my commitment. I raced for 25 years, had a lot of great success, met a lot of great people, had an excellent time. Racing enabled me to become a car dealer, get into the business I'm in for my family, myself, and I know that, if I stay there every day and I stay away from the racetracks, I'll stay selling cars, and I've made that commitment to do that. But I miss it a lot. It was a great sport. It's a shame today it's got so difficult for the younger people to be involved. My son Robbie started to race, and hell, it's a good thing we got 6 car dealerships, so we couldn't afford to run that damn thing, but I can't imagine what it'd be like owning a Winston Cup stock car. But again, I'd like to thank everybody that was involved in this day. There was a lot of people that were involved in my career because I was one of them little guys coming up with no money, a lot of energy, and wanted to do all of this stuff that I seen on TV. And some of the people that are here today, my dad, who was a big, big part in my racing career, because I could have never bought tires. We used to steal them off the truck so that we could go racing. I'd like to thank my dad. All of my children are here today. They went through a lot. They used to stay in that parking lot sometimes till 2, 3 in the morning while we were doing a little bench racing. So they went through a lot of that. I'd like to thank all of them. And of course, my wife Paula, she went through a lot, stood behind me, pushed me and probed me when needed be. And I'd like to thank her, and I'd like to thank everybody that's here today. Thank you.
This is yours to keep. That one you got to put on the wall. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask for one thing. Ronnie? No, don't put it there. The thing that I remember about Ron Bouchard is the way he could get it done on the outside. Go down to the outside, Ronnie. The Wassa Wassa Kid, ladies and gentlemen, from Pittsburgh, Massachusetts. Another sidebar story before our next presenter comes up is I was at, one more here. I was at the University of Vermont as an aspiring freshman. And up there, they had Catamount Stadium, Thunder Road. And I'd been following racing. By then, we'd gone to Stafford, and there were several really outstanding drivers that moved from Stafford and Thompson and Utica Rome and what we used to call the NASCAR circuit down to the big time down south. One of them lost his life, Don McTavish, but another one took, as some people have alluded to, the hopes and dreams and aspirations of every short track racer and short track fan to the Daytona 500. And a fellow announcer by the name of Ken Squire was announcing on the Motor Racing Network, and as Pete Hamilton sliced across victory lane, Squire, as he always could do, better than anybody else, there he goes, ladies and gentlemen, from Dedham, Massachusetts, a man who just 1 year ago was competing regularly at the Catamount Stadium where we race on every Saturday night, Pete Hamilton. I got so mad. I found Ken Squire's name and address in the telephone directory of Waterbury, Vermont, went down, introduced myself, said, "You don't know me, but," and I proceeded to give him a new you-know-what. Well, needless to say, he decided the best way to get even with me was to give me a job. I worked for nothing at the Motor Racing Network for 3 years, and as they say, the rest is history. But the thing that I will never forget were the word pictures of that day, because they certainly were. They were pictures that were painted bigger than life. We had had people like Gene Bergen that had run. We had had other fellas that had gone down south and run on the beach, but this man I will never forget, because this man made it all real, at least to this kid. And to induct him into the Hall of Fame, I would like to again, Bones Booth here. Bones? Oh, I'm sorry. Oops. Wait. Bruce Cohen. Wait a minute. Let me check the gun. Yeah, I know. He's clean.
I'll run second to Bonesy any day. I'd like to thank Nier for inviting me to do this. It's a great tribute to New England racing. It's a great honor among some of the greatest people in the world. Growing up in the Boston area, the nearest racetrack was the Lake Norwood Arena. In the early 60s, there was a tall, blonde-haired kid, and he really wasn't from Dedham. He had an apartment there for a little while. Basically, he was from Newton, had a hobby car, numbered the V8 after one of his heroes, Wild Bill Slater. Well, anyway, he ran a few years in the hobby cars, moved into the NASCAR sportsman, driving for Ronnie Sayers, Ray Stonkus. Then he moved to the Worcester Sand and Gravel cars that had been driven by Mario Fats Caruso, the late Fats Caruso. And in 1967, he won the NASCAR sportsman title. That's when it was a real honor to win it. You'd run 80, 90, 100 races a year. They say that you remember points in time. That fall, we were gathered in Needham, Massachusetts, Gasoline Alley. A lot of people worked out of there. A lot of people ran their race cars from there and near there. And we were all gathered one Saturday afternoon in Jack Malone's donut shop. And there were about 30 of the regular malingerers, race car bums, mechanics, you know, just hanging out. And this fellow had a brand new pickup, 2 suitcases, no money, and a Ford pickup. And he was in there, he was embarking on a trip down south to try to make the big time. We're all there. Jack Malone says, "Peter, look around at all these people. They're your friends, they've worked with you, they've raced with you, they've done you favors, you've done them favors. Take a look at every one of them. You're on the way up, and when you're on the way down, these same people are going to be here. And then Jack said a very poignant thing. He said, Peter, remember one thing. Don't forget your roots. And Peter, as Jackie had said, Mike, and Mike Joy has said, went on to win the Holy Grail, the greatest race in America, the Daytona 500. Peter Hamilton deserves all the accolades he gets. And I'd like to bring Peter here, and I would also like to say, before Peter comes up to get his award, he has never forgotten his roots. He's still Peter Hamilton from Dedham or Needham, Massachusetts. Peter?
This is wonderful for me to be here. It's a lot scarier being in front of a microphone than sitting there waiting for the show to begin and all strapped in a race car. I'm so proud to be from New England, particularly this afternoon. It's just a lot of people throughout the country, they have their racing deal, but New England racing, particularly in the time that I grew up in it, is really it's a family, and I have never forgotten that. And it's there's anything that happened to me is I'm kind of I'm the product of all the guys that have been introduced so far, and some guys that haven't been introduced. I just was extremely lucky to be at the right place at the right time. Every guy that's been introduced up here, I have a story, and they taught me something. I was thinking of Rennie Charland. I don't know why, but one day he called me and he said, would you interested in going to Daytona with me and running this pure oil economy run? And this was years ago, they did that. And you know, the truth is, we got Rennie and I, and for me, thousands of laps on that racetrack. I knew every crack in that place, and it helped. Little things like that, there's 1,000 things. In '66, I went down there with a car of Rocky Hinton's Tewksbury Speed Shop, and we went out and started the show. And if a man could hold his breath for 300 miles, I succeeded in doing that. It absolutely scared me to death. I come in, got out of the car, and Eddie Flemke was not too far away at any given time in my career. And he come over, I said, Eddie, if I can just somehow get back to New England, I will never come back here. Please don't make me come back. But as it happened, I went back and I kept trying. And I don't, a kid with not much talent, but I think I had a lot of desire. And sometimes maybe desire is maybe more important than all that other kind of stuff. Is just to really want to do it. And I'm very grateful. It was I just wouldn't have missed this for the world to see all the guys again and to hear the stories again. You can travel. I was lucky enough to race in California and Phoenix and all over the place, all over this country, doing different types of things. But the New England roots stay with you, and a lot of different people. Jack Malone is still my very good friend. I left him a couple days ago in Florida, and we knock around together to this day, and he got me going a lot. And Eddie Flemke, there's no words that I can say for what he taught me. So I want to thank you again for allowing me to be here with these other folks. Thank you very much.
Well, Pete, you have one last thing to do after the photography, and that's to post these. And I think, folks, if you get a chance later, come up and look, because they're absolutely breathtaking, is the permanent plaques that'll be on display. And I think a lot of work went into them, too, of trying to capture not only the visage, but also maybe a car that was emblematic. So, Pete, the honors are all yours now, and just forgive me if I don't say, and there he is, just like he was running Catamount Stadium just one short year ago, but you certainly are a fitting member And I think Bruce probably said it the best. When I was an aspiring young talent, I knew that this man never forgot his roots. And I always knew when things got a little tight around the Winston Cup garage, it wasn't called Winston Cup back then, I could kind of sneak over and at least get a little smile and a wink from him. And in the beginning, I figured he didn't know me from Adam, but then, sure enough, he did remember. He says, "Oh, you're that little fat kid who used to be around Stafford all the time."
I never.
Pete Hamilton, ladies and gentlemen. You know, all these accolades being thrown out about Mike Joy and me and Dick Berger, and you know.
Thank you, Jack. I'm not as good as these TV and radio guys either. Because induction into any Hall of Fame is largely the result of what an athlete has done on his or her field of play, we tip our hats today to the racing career of a fellow called Ed Flemke. We tip our hats to a man whose career spanned from the late 1940s to the late 1970s. We tip our hats to one of the original Eastern Bandits, to a hero who drove and built some of stock car racing's most innovative machines, to a legend whose smiling eyes lit up victory lanes at more racetracks than most of us will ever even visit. Estimates at Ed Flemke's career victory total range anywhere from 400 to 600, but no one will ever know for sure. Eddie's most productive days came before tracks kept accurate records, before weekly newspapers allowed fans to follow the careers of their favorite drivers, and certainly before every driver had a publicist or a PR guy to brag about what he had done. And yet the fact that no definitive records exist to document Flemke's entire career is perfect, because to define this man's racing life through facts and numbers alone would only serve to shortchange him. Eddie Flemke was a great driver, certainly, but he was, above all else, a leader, a teacher, a mentor. He brought out the very best in people. If you need examples of that, just glance at the list of names who joined him today in being inducted into this wonderful Hall of Fame. I believe that his peers, heroic drivers like Rennie Charland, Bug Stevens, Bill Slater, Gene Bergen, and Ernie Gahan, would tell you that they knew they had to be at their very best if they were going to run with Eddie Flemke. I believe that the great Ali Silva, who raced with Eddie only occasionally, knew that he had to be at his best when he invaded Flemke's turf or when Flemke invaded his. I believe that if they were able to join us here today, Bill Welch would say that Flemke made him a better announcer, and Harvey Tattersall would say that in some way, Flemke made him a better promoter. Eddie simply had a way of making everybody better. He was so good at it that some of the people he made better went on to enjoy a fame even greater than his own. Ron Bouchard became a household racing name with his upset win at Talladega, but long before he ever went to Alabama, he had to battle with Eddie Flemke at Seekonk, Stafford, and Waterford. Richie Evans drove to 9 NASCAR modified championships, but first he had to follow Eddie Flemke around Lancaster, Fulton, and Utica Rome. Pete Hamilton won the biggest stock car race in the world, the Daytona 500, but not until he had learned some valuable lessons from Ed Flemke at Thompson, Norwood, and Albany, Saratoga. Their own natural abilities allowed Ronnie and Richie and Pete to do what they did, but all three have admitted freely that Eddie Flemke showed them shortcuts on their journeys to greatness. I think Eddie was more proud of that than he ever let on. He brought out the best in every driver he faced, every mechanic he worked with, every car owner for whom he drove. He brought out the best in a lot of us, simply by setting standards for things like hard work, honesty, and integrity. Not a single day goes by that I don't think of Eddie Flemke, and not a single day goes by without his extraordinary legacy continuing to impact automobile racing across New England and across this nation. And so we tip our hats today to a man we knew as Steady Eddie, as the boss, as just plain Pops. The luckiest among us knew him as a friend. Two of my favorite people, Ed Flemke Jr. and Paula Bouchard, knew him as Dad. It is both a high honor and a personal privilege for me to ask them to accept this plaque on behalf of their father, the great Ed Flemke.
I'm not walking over there.
Oh, yeah.
First time you
She kicked my ass many times, I'll tell you. Yep. I guess I should start off by telling you a little inside advice my father gave me the first day I was going to climb into a race car. I strapped into my first car at Harvey Tattersall's racetrack at Riverside Park in 1973. I've never been in a race car before that, and as I strapped in and was scared to death, a lot like I am now, he just looked in the window, put his hand on my arm, and said, with all of his wisdom and all he knew about racing, his words to me were, the only person you have to impress was yourself. He turned around, walked away, and went on to Thompson to run a modified, Bobby Jenkins' 2X modified, against the super modifieds, and finished second. Okay, so if I get through this, I am impressed, I'll tell you. Okay. On behalf of our family, I would like to congratulate everyone who helped make the Hall of Fame and this banquet possible. I know it's been a long-time dream to have the Hall of Fame a reality. A lot of hard work went into this project, and now that it's together, you should be very proud. Way back in 1981, when NEAR was first getting started, you tried to get my father to get involved, and he wasn't very cooperative. I can remember him saying, "I'm not joining an old-timers club. I'm not ready for no damn rocking chair." If he was still alive today, he would be 68 this year, and I'm pretty sure he would still be saying he isn't ready for that rocking chair. But I'm sure he would be very proud to be inducted into the NEAR Hall of Fame. I know you know the race car driver, Ed Flemke, and all he has accomplished in the world of racing. The record books speak for themselves. But I would also like you to know he was also a great brother, the youngest of 6, a loving husband twice, a super father and dad of 5, a very proud grandfather of 7, and pops to many. To the people closest to him, a true friend. To him, a true friend was very special. He often said to me, "You are judged by the friends you keep." In the past 13 plus years my dad's been gone, I have met many of his friends all over the country, each one proudly telling me stories about how they knew him. One in particular stands out in my mind, and I would like to share it with you now. A few years ago, I was at the National Auto Racing Hall of Fame in Flemington Speedway, looking around at some of the displays and reading some of the plaques hanging on the walls. As I was reading the plaques, I came across my dad's, and as I was reading it to myself, an older gentleman, who I believe was working there, came over to me and said, "Quite a man that Flemke was. I was very lucky to get to know him. We didn't get to see him much, though. You know, he never did care much for the dirt. He always said it was for planting potatoes." Then he smiled and chuckled a bit, looked up at me and said, "But when he was here, he always made time to look me up." Then he turned, started to walk away, paused for a moment, turned back at me and said, "I'm proud to be able to say he was my friend. Eddie was quite a gentleman. I think you may have liked him." He smiled again, turned and walked away. On that day, and today as I am looking around this room, I can really appreciate what my dad was saying. You are judged by the friends you keep. He would be very happy to see all of you here today. Thank you for inducting our father, our friend, into the Hall of Fame. And I do have to tell you, this is the proudest day of my life. Okay. I can only try to imagine how my father would have felt today. Thank you.
I'm going to break from what is normally supposed to happen right now because this particular induction means a great deal to me personally. And there's a number of reasons why. Probably the first race car driver that I ever met was Eddie Flemke. And the way he was introduced to me is I was a track brat at the old Ray's Garage down at the end of Route 72. And Ray Garuti had a driver by the name of Moneybags Mo Gursey, who was running the car at the time, and it was numbered 14. And they were not at all pleased with lately how Mo was doing, and they were brothers, and like all brothers, they fussed and feuded and fighted. And Richie, who was the heavyset one, unbeknownst to Ray, built another race car in a garage away from the racetrack. And if I'm not mistaken, as the story was told to me, a young kid out of Fort Dix, New Jersey was selected to drive that car. And they tried to figure out what number to put on the car. And they came up with the number 28. And those of you that are old-timers, you remember the 14 and the 28. Well, the reason for 28 was Eddie Flemke. Because according to the guy that built the car, Richie Garuti, in his conversation with his brother, when his brother said, "Why 28?" he says, "'Cause twice the car and twice the goddamn driver." My first recollections of Eddie were as a driver at Riverside Park and also hanging around the garage, because as all of you know, part of it was bench racing. And for me growing up, I mean, there was Y.A. Tittle when it was football season, but there was Eddie Flemke. And I always felt honored. And one of the great things is I think Eddie and I kind of grew up side by side, and my old man would try and teach him a few things, and his old man would try and teach me a few things. And one of the things that happened along the way was a man that was short in stature, but was huge in terms of reputation. I can remember going to the Daytona Speedway and seeing this young man, or this old man, actually at that time older, parked in a car just down in the corner. And I'd go over there all excited because it was a face from home, and it was Eddie, and I'd say, "What are you doing?" He says, "Just watching." And then I could go back and always ask him, "Well, what do you think?" And Pete, you know, no matter what, he always would give you a word now and again. And he did it for me in my career. As an announcer, he used to critique me. And it's funny, Eddie, that you say that, because it was the one thing that he one time said to me, too. The only person, Jackie, you ever have to impress is yourself. Don't worry about the rest of the people. Do the very best job you can. And you know, I've always felt that Eddie Flemke was somehow related to me and to my family, because I think we're intrinsically entwined. And kind of like family, whether it's been good times or bad times, we've always been in there fussing and feuding with each other. But I said it to you a couple of years ago when you scored that victory at Thompson, and I'll say it to you again. We miss him, but he's looking down, and today, he's applauding.
Character, color. You look at some of today's boring Winston Cup drivers, and then you have a guy like Rennie Charland. His 4 championships, where a lot of these modern guys on, let's say, the modified tour are crying they have 20, 22 races. Guys like Rennie, Peter, Bugsy, Ernie, Ed Flemke, they were in anywhere from 80 to 120 shows a year. They were racing. In the modern age of specialization, when you have big track cars, short track cars, medium short track cars, big short track cars, these guys did it with one car. They went to Norwood. They went on the dirt at Fonda. They went to Flemington. They went to Old Bridge. They went to Manassas. They went all over the place with one car. Rennie Charland set a modern standard of 4 in a row championships, running all those races. Is he the clown prince of racing? He certainly was. You always knew from those stinky cigars when he was around. I think almost everyone who's probably over 35 in this room could get up and give you a funny Rennie Charland story. Many of them are unprintable, but they'd all be very, very funny. My quick one was when I was young and impressionable, the nearest track to Boston where I grew up was the Norwood Arena, and I was kind of a little motorhead. I went to high school with Marvin Rifkin's son Bobby, and Bobby said, "Hey, you ought to go to the Norwood Arena one Saturday night." We started going. I happened to go with some Fats Caruso fans, and we learned to boo Wild Bill Slater. And now I'm glad to say Bill and I are good friends. But after going to the races a few weeks, we started hanging around afterwards, looking at the cars. And one day I'm looking at this gold number 3, and I asked this guy who had a shirt that said Rennie, and I figured, well, this guy drove it. "Rennie, what gear do you run in the car?" And he said, "None of your business," with a few expletives in between. And as, you know, my racing career or whatever habit went on, we raced with Rennie, we raced against him, we laughed together, we cried together. He was one heck of a racer, and I think it's a testament to Rennie Charland that he won 4 championships in a row when a racer was a racer and not one of these overpaid crybabies. I would like to induct Rennie Charland to come up here, please.
Didn't say anybody.
Rini, before we induct you, could you stand right there, please, for a minute? Could you stand right over there in front of Dr. Bergman?
No, right here.
This is for you, Rini. That's for all the times, all the snakes, all the water pistols, all the firecrackers that Rini did. But, you know, when it comes down to it... When it comes down to it, Rini Charland is and was one heck of a race car driver. And I'm really privileged to be here today. I'm privileged to see many of my friends here, and it's also a privilege to induct the champ himself, Mr. Charland.
You're only jealous because you ain't French. Well, let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. I feel very, very good for coming down here. And I seen one of my old mechanics in the back there, Freddie Rosner, was a great help to me when I first started my racing with NASCAR. And I believe if it wasn't for Freddie Rosner and Tony Marcel, I probably couldn't do it. We separated, went on our racing. We were successful in everything we did. We were happy. And what the story is, I started racing to have fun. Fun is everything in racing. When you don't have no fun, what are you going to do? If you watch TV, if you don't like the channel, you flick it. Am I correct? So this is the way I feel about racing. If I can't race, if I can't have fun to enjoy it, you ain't going to have no fun. And God forbid, you ain't going to make enough money. They're going to get you one way or another. They get you when you come in, they get you when you leave, they get you when you get tires, you got to have insurance policy, you got to buy a suit. I don't want to go any further. And like I said, I want to thank NERA for this is one of the greatest things I've seen in a long time. And I'm in the process of putting up a museum of the Fonda Speedway. It's been okayed by the Fair Board. I've been looking for a long time for a place to do this. I traveled my museum from Agawam to New York and back again. It just wasn't work out because everybody wants to get a piece of the action, and believe me, you put up a museum, you ain't going to make no money. And everybody thinks, well, what are you going to do with the money? I said, it's my money. How can I do anything else but spend it? And I like to have all you people, when we get it going up the Fonda Speedway, you people will see what kind of dirt track racing is like. And I've been honored to be lucky up there. I'm not good, I was just lucky. I'd rather be lucky than good. But I don't know which one is better. But I had, I won a lot of races up there, and I don't know what to say, but I'm glad that this organization here really put out a nice place here. Let me see if I can remember the names here. Oh yeah, here we are. Thank you, committee affiliates, near committee. Thank you, promotion race directors and all the track ever raced on. Thank you, car owners and crew members. And first of all, I want to thank all the people that were here today to come down and put me in with the great people like Eddie Flemke. And I raced with Eddie Flemke. I was one of the chosen people that happened to be one of the Eastern Bandits with Eddie. And believe me, it was a great honor to do that. And it felt good when these Southern boys, they used to ask us, where are you going racing? I said, well, we're going to Richmond. And they said, well, we're going to Moayak then. So they had to fight for a second or third spot all the time. So I thank you very much for what you did, and I thanks little French boy here. And the the Sizzler boys, which I call them the Sizzler boys, and I think they started a big deal in racing, and we all can do that. Thank you.
Champ, you and Brucey have one more thing to do, and that's to hang the plaque on the wall.
I don't want to do nothing with him.
Can you imagine he as a member of the Eastern Bandits, meaning that he was an ambassador for New England down south? I can just hear it now. No wonder Eddie never said much. You couldn't get a word in edgewise, but truly, probably one of the greatest champions that we've had. And in a time when there wasn't a lot of exposure, and a time when there wasn't a lot of publicity, Rennie Charland did it the hard way, winning multiple national championships. We're down to our 12th inductee, and, well, I'll tell you more about him after he's inducted. But it's only fitting that we call back probably one of the first guys that I remember writing in mainstream news about auto racing, and I didn't know you were on a pit crew. Pete Zanardi, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, Bugsy, we're running the back of the pack here, Bugsy, and I think that's probably apropos. You know, Bugsy Stevens was the first person I ever saw who could carry on 4 and 5 conversations at the same time. It was a learned ability because everybody through his whole career wanted a little piece of Bugsy. You went to the racetrack and you wanted to be able to go home and say, I talked to Bugsy last night. And Bugsy would point at you and he'd wink and he'd throw a stone at you. You'd walk by and he'd grab your clothing. It was recognition, and that's all you needed, man. You were on top of the world. Bugsy talked to you last night. That'd be classic understatement to stand up here and tell you how good this guy was on a racetrack. I mean, you count his championships in 10, and that includes 3 championships back when Lincoln was president. And you count his victories in hundreds. Martinsville, Oxford Plains, everywhere he won. Should come as no surprise to any of us that Bugsy's last modified ride, the '87 fall final, was a media event, because by then all those conversations I'm talking about must have totaled in the billions. I suggest to you that he might have been New England's first auto racing media darling, because I can tell you, I worked a little bit of public relations in my time, and we set up mythical battles for this dimwit with absolutely everybody. We set him up with DeCero. We set him up with Ray Hendrick. We set him up with Jeff Bodine, with Burgeon, with Bouchard, with anybody. If we could put people in there, Bugsy was the guy to do it, because Bugsy knew how to play to the crowd. One thing I'm sure about, though, we all wanted to beat Bugsy Stevens. We asked Bugsy Stevens to define what being a modified person was all about, and damn it all, Bugsy gave us that. He showed us how to be a modified person. And I can remember one of the first stories I did, I believe I did it for you, Doctor. Bugsy Stevens once said to me, you can take Formula One, you can take Indianapolis cars, and you can take modifieds. Everything else is a step down. And I'll tell you what, I went to war a lot of times with those words. What was being a modified person? Like Bugsy says, we were all having fun, and anybody who wanted to join in was more than welcome. Bugs showed us how to be a modified person, and for that, if for no other reason, Bugsy, I owe you, and I trust all of us out there owe him. Ladies and gentlemen, my hero, Bugs Stevens.
Jesus, what do you say? Everybody's done such a great job yakking about everything. When you get up here, I'm going to go brain dead. But I see, again still, I see all the guys up here getting these awards, and I think of all my friends that I raced with that have passed away. I think of Pete Hamilton at Daytona, winning that race at Talladega. I remember, matter of fact, Pete, I'm going to give you this one before we start. It's a reminder. I came in the first time I went that Superbird there in Charlotte. You were flying, you'd won Daytona, Talladega, everything. I go to Charlotte. He passed me 6 times in the race, and I came in 6th. And he says, how the hell did you do that? I'll never forget that as long as I live. Ernie and I, we go back to 1966 when Lenny and I finally started racing for the national championship. We didn't even know we were in it. And I remember Ernie was one of my good friends. I remember him cutting me off in some shit box he had there. Going 160 miles an hour. He didn't even know where he was, but he was going to win that championship. Is that right, Ernie? That old Ford you had, was it? But we all go back to one, and Rainey, I never had a chance to spin you out. You probably deserved it. I never got close to you. You were too good on dirt. The only guy I did really spin out that I went after a few times is not here. He's working for NASCAR now. They all praised Eddie Flemke, and you can't praise Eddie Flemke enough. He taught me a lot. He taught Peter. Peter's one of his disciples. A whole bunch of us learned a lot from Eddie Flemke. One funny side of it, I'll tell you, is one night I remember, I shouldn't be telling you all this bull, but one night at Catamount, I think I was running for the championship up there, and I wasn't running quite good, and Eddie was banging me, and then he got by me, and then all of a sudden he's running all over the racetrack, and I got by him again, and then he banged me, almost got me around, spun me out. Coming off the second turn, I let him get up beside me, and I ran him off the racetrack. He and I were good friends. We always talked after the races before. He wasn't a good drinker like I was, but you know what I mean. I went over to him, and I said, what the hell are you doing, Eddie? I says, what are you doing to me? He said, you're going to kill somebody. I said, you know, Eddie, you told me to do the same to me as you want me to do to you. So I said, the story just turned around, Eddie. We're still going to be friends, even though I did what you taught me to do, you know what I mean? I thank everybody here. This is a great gathering. I never believed this. I was in one of these last week in New York. It was wild. Everybody got choked up same way. It's hard to believe the old farts would all come out and see it. The kids today don't even know most of us. Our names are still written on the wall at Thompson Speedway if they haven't painted them, you know. But I thank this great thing, and Miss Cody there and the crew that put this thing together. I've been reading about in there. Matter of fact, I can't get the money up to pay for my membership, but I guess I'll have to now. But it's so great to see everybody here. That's all right, Jack. You want to see the funny thing about this? That's a promoter. He gave me $2. My family been with me through the years, and the same bull. Oh, we all got to go through it. Got a wonderful family. I've got a million friends, and I'm only happy to say that I'm not afraid to walk to anybody and talk to anybody. If you don't like me, it's too bad. Too bad. Go play with somebody else, because I got a lot of friends that I like to play with, and there's not too many guys that can say I've stepped on their toes. Thank you very much. $3. $3.
You gotta go put it on over there, sir. You gotta go hang it up.
Thank you.
First time I ever got anything back from Bugsy.
First time I ever got anything from you.
Pete Zanardi says that the Bug Man probably defined what being a modified racer was all about. I think probably the greatest thing that Well, the two of them, like, this is like frickin' frack over here. One can't hear, the other one can't think. Okay, now we've hung it up, Bugsy. Now turn around, take Pete, and look at these camera people, remember? Yeah, right.
Jack, I don't know. ABC's done a
Bugsy got the other day, I mean, a while back, a doorbell rang, and Bugsy answered the door, and there was a snail there. Bugsy picked it up and said, "Damn it," and he threw it as far as he could. 2.5 years later, the doorbell rang again. Snail looked up at Bugsy and says, "What was that all about?"
Jack, were you going to pay me?
Am I going to pay you?
Can I tell him about Bill Clinton?
Yeah. No. Only Bug Stevens could tell a political joke. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bug.
You know, Bill Clinton's a good friend of Jack's. So he didn't want me to tell you this, but about 3 weeks ago, Bill was jogging around the White House and got off the grounds, and he's going down the back road there and came by a hooker, and he says, "How much, honey?" She says, $100. He said, "Piff, you gotta go." So about 2 weeks later there, he's jogging down the road with Hillary, and he comes upon this old hooker again, and she says, "See what you get for $10?
You know, when we started the presentation, I can't believe you. Always was and still is the only man that can leave me speechless. We started the presentations about 2.5 hours ago, and I opened up my remarks by saying that it was only fitting that we finally praised and treasured our heritage. As you look at the 12 plaques that are here, remember that they are just the beginning of names that should be considered in future years for induction. We have the Bouchards, the Stevenses, the Flemkes, the Tattersalls, the Silvas. But there's still names like DeSero. There's still names that belong out there. There's still names like Janowski. There are still many, many people that not only helped popularize our sport, but to help define it. They stretch not only as drivers, but as car owners. B.B. Zielinski comes to mind. Many names that we have an obligation to keep as members in the future of the Hall of Fame. And why is that? Maybe as Mike Joy said, maybe as Pete Hamilton said, maybe as Bruce Cohen said. So we never forget where we came from. But more importantly, so we can pay homage to people that truly have helped make this sport what it is today. My good friend Dan Fouts, who I work with in football during the fall months, I asked him one time, I said, "Dan, what is your fondest memory of professional football?" And he said without hesitation, "The day that I was inducted into the Hall of Fame." And I expressed a little bit of surprise at that, and he said, "Jackie, you don't understand. When you are judged by your peers and by fans to have excelled at something, it leaves a legacy that will be there long after you are gone." And the more I thought about it and the more I got ready to do this, I thought about the fact that in many ways, this too, it's not Canton, Ohio, but it is too a Hall of Fame. And for those of you that have been inducted today, my sincerest congratulations. For those of you that have celebrated these fine moments today, my thanks. And hopefully, this is just the beginning of our heritage and our long, long history. Thank you very much.